He is the head coach of the Detroit Pistons. He is Dwane Casey, and he's known us for a long time, yet continues to come on with us, which is a shock to me every time because we don't deserve his presence. Coach, it's great to hear your voice. How are things? How are the family? How you doing?
Doing great. Is it Sid? I used to tell you voices from each other, but now I have to guess, but I think it's Sid. How you doing, guys?
It's the voice. Yes, I'm Sid. I'm the the attractive. I'm the attractive one of the duo. Tim is the other voice you will hear.
Well, that's not what Tim told me.
Yeah, we speak the truth to each other, Coach. How are you? How's the family?
Doing good. You know, going through this pandemic has been good and bad. It gave us a chance to spend time with the family and watch the kids grow and get to know your family real well. And so that's the positive. But the negative is the fact that, you know, you're not used to being home as much. So you miss basketball and miss the grind of going through the season. But hopefully, you know, everybody there in Toronto and you guys, your family was healthy and made it to this thing. It's still not over, so we still have to be careful. But I think we're through the worst of it.
Coach, let's dive into kind of what the moment is. And you did release a statement on Saturday through the Detroit Pistons, and we've gone through your story in terms of desegregation at a very young age and going through that when camera phones were not around, and you have an 8-year-old child now, and just your general sense. And I know it changes by the minute sometimes depending on what the news cycle is, but where are you at? What's going through your head right now?
Well, I'm frustrated and angry, guys. But the most important thing, I'm hopeful because I watch these protests, the peaceful protests going up and down in every city around the country. And in the 60s and the early 70s, most of those were African Americans. 60s marching with Martin Luther King up and down the street. Those were mostly African Americans. But today you see every color, every race, every religion walking up and down the street protesting for what is right. And so that gives me hope. But every time I turn on the television, I see the video of George Floyd in Minneapolis, where I used to coach, and still have a lot of friends there. I watched the video of the young man jogging down the street in Georgia. I know the folks in Louisville, Kentucky, where the young lady was shot in her apartment. And even in Dallas, a young man was sitting in his living room, and a policeman walks in, mistakes her apartment for his and shoots him, and the young man's a doctor. So just all those things, it's not just one incident, guys. It's so many things over and over and over again. Some of them overt, some of them are very subtle. And luckily, myself and I know Masai's spoken out, we have a small platform where we can at least voice it and make sure we get it to, touch a few hearts, have someone to at least listen a little bit. And if they have any brains at all or have a heart at all, they have to listen and at least consider if they think, they have anybody around them or anybody in their family that's a racist, let them know it's not right. It's not right. And it's not just against black people. We have a lot of Chaldean folks here in Michigan, it just whoever it is. Don't look at the other race other than yourself as somebody that's less human. And the more we can think that way, the better off we're going to be and be able to live together. And hopefully this is a good point, men, a good time that will change, be the time for change right now.
Dwane Casey joining us here on Tim and Sid. And Coach, we've had a few of these conversations, and what popped into my head initially was, is this any different than the previous 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 times where these conversations have come up? And you kind of addressed that in your first answer, which leads me to, how important is the group? Because when you walked into a school in Kentucky, when a lot of people didn't want you there, I don't know if the group was that big. So how important is it that it's not just one or two or 40 that need to take on the burden, but that so many are willing, almost feel a pressure to share in that burden?
I think it's so important. Like you said, walking in, some of those folks that I fought against every day when I was in third and fourth grade, they're my friends today. But it took them getting to know me. But I think it's going to take everybody. And it's not just going to be about talking about it, Tim. It's going to be about, action. Going to your local police department, going to the legislature, they're in Parliament there in Canada, to talk about policy change, changing the laws. The judicial system is so rigged against the minority, it's not even funny. And it's, just going to be interesting to see what happens to the policemen in Minnesota just because of the system. My thing is, myself, I'm got a call into our police chief here in Detroit to sit down and talk to him, my owner, myself, to talk to him about what we can do with their training in their police academy, because that's where it starts, is the policemen, how they train, what the rules are, the policies that they have, to get those changed or get some real teeth in them if they decide to go off and go rogue or go to be a bad cop. So those are the things we all can do in our local markets, our local cities, to help promote change. Because if you try to go and change the whole country at one time, it's probably not going to happen right away. But what happens is, if everybody, and we talked about this in our coaches meeting, if we can go out as individual groups, each market, and go talk to the local leaders, the lawmakers. And again, it's going to take a guy like my owner, because they're going to look at myself, Nate McMillan, and Doc Rivers as three angry old black men. But until, Greg Pop and Steve Kerr and Rick Carlisle speaks up, that's when they will listen. And when the owners step in, they will listen. Because, again, to right, wrong, and indifferent, when they speak up and the majority speaks up, that's when real change will happen. And, to change the policies and the laws. And that's what we're shooting for. That's why it was intentional to put Pop in the lead and Steve Kerr in the lead, and Rick Carlisle in the lead of the coaches committee, and Stan Van Gundy's on there and doing a heck of a job. So that's important that, the white coaches step up and speak out against racism, injustice, and all these things. And so that group, when those groups, or the group of influential people and influential coaches in every sport speak out, that's when real change can happen and we start changing things.
Pistons head coach Dwane Casey here on Tim and Sid. Part of your statement, Dwane, that stuck out to me. Well, the entire thing stuck out to me, but this line was interesting. You said, we must change the way we see and hear each other. When you watch cable news right now, when you see what's going on, when you see that these protests have gone global, Australia, Paris, London, do you think we are changing the way we hear and see each other?
I totally do, Sid. I think it's really, and that's why I think this moment in time can be a lightning rod for us. Sort of like the marches back in the 60s with Dr. King, and by the way, who got killed. He was probably the most nonviolent man alive, but he got killed by violence. And that's the irony of that. But I think right now it can be a lightning rod. You got the whole world watching and listening. And that's the most important thing that I think this situation has done. It's allowed me, who in normal times people say, oh, stick to coaching, stick to being a general manager, stick to basketball, do what you know. But it's allowed now everyone to put them in position to listen. Listen to Dwane Casey, listen to Masai Ujiri, listen to whoever, LeBron James, talk about sensitive things that makes everybody uncomfortable. And I think it's to make, once everybody's uncomfortable, I think that's the most important time for change. And I think that's what this whole, unfortunately and fortunately, this situation with George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery has done, is it allowed people to listen and go fight through their uncomfortable feeling of, okay, am I a racist? No, that's not the point. But, it's a situation where, people like yourself, Tim and Sid, who I know are not racist and whatsoever, but people who may say, well, am I, or have guilt feelings, it allows them to actively listen to everyone. And I think that's what these times are doing now is making that okay to speak out. Because normally, everybody say, oh, stick up and shut up and stick to basketball. But living through it, going to the courthouse, going to the restaurant or the courthouse and seeing, white restrooms and color, those, we've come away from those times, but still there's a lot of work still to be done.
We were just talking before you joined us about when things get reframed is when it gets dangerous, because all we're talking about is equality. And
right.
If we can just keep it on equality, I think there are way more people who understand that. Like,
right.
How do we not allow the conversation to be hijacked into anything else but equality?
Tim, that is a great statement, because that's what everyone gets afraid of. Nobody, I don't think anybody in the protest or anybody that's speaking out right now is asking for a handout, asking for something more than anybody else is getting. Like you said, all anyone is asking for is equality. Let's start at the goal line, at the same mark, and let's start the race there. See who works the hardest, who trains the hardest, who studies the hardest, and now let's run that 50-yard dash. You start out at the 10, and now I'm at the goal line. You're going to win that no matter how hard I work. And if you're running and I start running, it's going to be hard as hell for me to catch you. So the equality part is all anyone is asking for. Is look at me, look at George Floyd, look at Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor in Kentucky. Look at them the same way as any other human. I saw a statistic. 65% of the people in Minnesota had that chokehold that was arrested, had that chokehold used on them.
Wow.
19% of white, 65% was African American. 19% were white that had the chokehold used on them. So, and it's only a small portion of small percentage of population of blacks in Minneapolis. So, those are the equality things that you're asking for, to be treated the same, to be spoke to the same, to be looked at the same. And nobody's asking for a handout. Just look at African Americans, Hispanic, whatever the race is. Let's look at each other as equals, as equal human beings.
It was great to hear your voice, Coach.
Yeah,
honestly,
Thank you, Sid.
It was really good for you to come on. You didn't have to, but we appreciate it. All the best to you and the family. And let's have another discussion down the road about basketball. I was gonna say about other issues, but if we need to have this discussion, then let's have this discussion. Hopefully, we won't have to have this discussion.
And that's the other thing, guys. Let's don't stop talking about it or be uncomfortable to talk about it. And that's why I respect you guys. You're not uncomfortable to talk about it. That says a lot right there, and that's a step. But we got to keep doing this. When the cameras go off of Minneapolis, when the cameras go off of the marches and protests, I think the conversation, and it's not a bad conversation, it's not adversarial, it's just awareness. Continue to beat the drum. Awareness hopefully will lead to change in laws and policies and procedures in the police department. And I think that's where these conversations with friends and people who understand and have empathy will take it.
Empathy, compassion, and I hope over the 20 years we've been in this business that we've proven that we're willing to evolve, learn, share in the uncomfort, and share in the burden. And maybe others will do the same. Thanks, Coach.
Yep.
God bless,
Thank
Coach.
you, guys. Love you both. Okay, thank you.
You too.